Buddha stories, motivational and calm your mind. In today's fast-paced world, finding peace can feel difficult. However, the timeless wisdom of Buddha reminds us that true tranquility lies within. Buddha stories, motivational and calm your mind, brings inspiring tales from the Buddha's life, offering lessons to uplift, soothe, and guide you toward inner peace. These stories help you overcome challenges, reduce stress, and find harmony, showing that calmness begins with the mind and has the power to transform your life. The parable of the burning house. Once, the Buddha was teaching his followers about the urgency of seeking enlightenment and freeing oneself from the cycle of birth and death, known as samsara. To illustrate his message, he shared the parable of the burning house. In a small village, there was a wealthy man who had several young children. He loved his children dearly, but he was often preoccupied with his work and possessions. One day, as the man was away from home, a terrible fire broke out, engulfing the house in flames. The fire spread quickly, and soon the entire house was ablaze. The man rushed back when he heard about the fire and found that his children were still inside, playing with their toys, completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. He called out to them, shouting, "Come out, children! The house is on fire! You must leave now." But the children, absorbed in their games, did not pay any attention to him or understand the danger they were in. Realizing that his warnings were not enough to convince them, the man decided to use a different approach. Knowing that his children loved playing with various types of toy carts, he called out to them, saying, "Children, outside, I have wonderful carts for each of you. Goat carts, deer carts, and ox carts. Come quickly, and you can have whichever one you like." Hearing this, the children became excited and immediately ran out of the burning house, eager to play with the promised carts. When they were safely outside, the father was filled with relief. He had successfully led them away from the fire and saved their lives. The children, however, looked around and asked, "Where are the carts you promised us?" The father, happy to see his children safe, brought out a beautiful, magnificent cart that far exceeded anything he had described. It was grand and adorned with jewels, much more splendid than they had imagined. He gave them this single large cart, which delighted them and fulfilled their wishes far beyond their expectations. The Buddha explained the meaning of the parable to his disciples. The burning house represents samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and suffering in which people are trapped. The children symbolize all beings who remain unaware of the danger they are in, distracted by worldly pleasures and attachments. The father represents the Buddha, who, out of compassion, seeks to lead beings to safety. The toy carts were a skillful means, upaya, used by the father to entice his children to leave the burning house. Similarly, the Buddha uses different teachings and methods to guide people according to their individual capacities and desires, helping them leave behind their attachments and find the path to enlightenment. The magnificent cart represents the ultimate reward of enlightenment, which surpasses anything that can be promised or imagined. Moral of the story: this story encourages us to recognize the urgency of spiritual practice and seek liberation from suffering, letting go of attachments to the toys that distract us in life. It also reminds us that the guidance offered by spiritual teachers may come in forms we do not immediately understand, but ultimately lead us to the lasting peace of enlightenment. The bamboo grove in patience. In a serene bamboo grove near the city of Rajagaha, the Buddha often taught his disciples the virtues of patience, wisdom, and compassion. The Bamboo Grove Monastery, gifted to the Buddha by King Bimbisara, was a peaceful setting surrounded by lush bamboo and calm streams, an ideal place for practicing meditation and mindfulness. The Buddha would frequently take walks with his followers in this tranquil environment, sharing stories and teachings that emphasized the importance of inner calm and patience. One day, as the disciples sat under the shade of the bamboo, a young monk approached the Buddha with a question. He was struggling with feelings of frustration and impatience, particularly with other monks who did not seem as dedicated to their practice. "Master," he said, "how can I cultivate patience when I feel so irritated by the actions of others? I want to improve, but sometimes it is hard not to feel anger." The Buddha listened carefully and then told the monk a story. "Once in this very bamboo grove," the Buddha began, "two monks were practicing together. One was calm and patient, while the other was often quick to anger and judgment. Despite his efforts, the impatient monk found it difficult to accept the pace and habits of others. He would meditate only sporadically, often blaming others for his struggles and distractions. One day, a strong wind blew through the bamboo grove, causing the bamboo trees to sway and rustle loudly. The impatient monk became agitated, seeing the noise as an obstacle to his meditation. He frowned at the trees and even thought of moving to a quieter spot. The patient monk replied, "When we sit to meditate, we don't control the wind or the rustling bamboo. Instead, we have the power to control our reactions. The sound is just sound. It becomes a disturbance only if I allow it to disturb my mind. Patience is not about changing the world around us, but about changing our response to it. By cultivating inner peace, we can find stillness even in chaos." Later, the impatient monk asked his friend, "How could you remain so still and undisturbed by the noise? Doesn't it bother you?" The patient monk replied, "When we sit to meditate, we don't control the wind or the rustling bamboo. Instead, we have the power to control our reactions. The sound is just sound. It becomes a disturbance only if I allow it to disturb my mind. Patience is not about changing the world around us, but about changing our response to it. By cultivating inner peace, we can find stillness even in chaos." The Buddha paused and looked at the young monk. "You see, patience is like the bamboo itself," he explained. "Bamboo sways with the wind, bending without breaking, and in doing so it remains resilient. In the same way, a patient person bends to life's challenges without breaking under frustration. Patience is not passive, it is a strength, a quiet resilience that allows us to respond without anger or distress." The young monk nodded, understanding that true patience comes from within. He realized that to be like the bamboo, he needed to accept both his own imperfections and those of others. Instead of letting irritation consume him, he would work on bending with life's winds and finding peace amid life's noise. Moral of the story. The story of the bamboo grove and patience teaches that patience is a form of inner strength, not a weakness. True patience is not about waiting for others or the world to change, but about transforming our own reactions. Like the bamboo that sways in the wind, we can learn to adapt and remain steady, finding peace amid life's disturbances. This tale reminds us that by cultivating inner calm, we can handle external challenges with grace and resilience, ultimately leading to a peaceful and composed mind. The story of the lost ox. Once, there was a devoted young monk who was eager to reach enlightenment. He had been studying under his master for many years and had made great progress in his practice. However, he often felt restless and frustrated, sensing that something was missing. He approached his master one day and confessed his worries. "Master," he said, "I have meditated for years, studied the teachings, and followed every instruction. Yet I feel like I am not any closer to enlightenment. Why is this happening?" The master looked at his disciple with understanding and offered him a simple story. "Let me tell you about the man and his lost ox," the master began. In a small village, there was a farmer who had an ox that he loved dearly. This ox was not only his helper in the fields, but also his companion. One day, the ox wandered off into the forest and became lost. The farmer, deeply attached to his ox, began searching everywhere, day and night, to find it. He felt anxious, desperate, and incomplete without his faithful friend. After days of searching, the farmer finally found the tracks of the ox. Seeing the tracks, his heart filled with hope. He followed them deeper and deeper into the forest, through rivers, hills, and dense thickets, never giving up. The journey was challenging and tiring, but he persevered, knowing he was getting closer. Eventually, he caught a glimpse of the ox grazing peacefully in a meadow. Relieved and filled with joy, he quietly approached and carefully guided the ox back home. With the ox by his side again, the farmer felt whole and at peace. No longer was he searching or longing, for he was reunited with what he had lost. The master paused and then said to the young monk, "This ox represents your true nature, your inner self. In the beginning, you may feel like something important is missing in your life, and you search for it outside yourself. But as you go further in your practice, you begin to find signs, insights, and glimpses of the truth within you, like the tracks of the ox." He continued, "The journey can be challenging, and at times you may feel lost or frustrated, but with patience and perseverance, you eventually catch sight of your true self and understand that it has always been there, quietly waiting for you to discover it. Once you find this inner peace, there is no longer a need for searching. You feel complete, just as the farmer did when he was reunited with his ox." The young monk listened carefully, realizing that his frustrations were a natural part of his spiritual journey. He understood that enlightenment was not something that could be forced or rushed, but was rather a gradual process of discovering his true nature. He thanked his master for the wisdom and returned to his practice with a renewed sense of patience and determination. Moral of the story. The story of the lost ox teaches us that the search for inner peace and enlightenment is not about gaining something new, but rediscovering what is already within us. Like the farmer searching for his ox, we may experience moments of frustration and feel lost. But with persistence, we eventually reconnect with our true selves. This story encourages patience, resilience, and trust in the process, reminding us that inner peace and wholeness are achieved by looking inward, not outward. This parable provides comfort to those on the spiritual path, emphasizing that even when we feel lost, our true nature is always within reach, waiting to be found. The Buddha and the Mirror. One day, a young monk approached the Buddha with a troubled heart. He had been practicing diligently, yet he felt plagued by his own thoughts and emotions. He confessed, "Master, I find myself constantly distracted by anger, jealousy, and pride. No matter how hard I try to be pure and calm, these emotions keep arising. Why can't I escape from these feelings?" The Buddha listened carefully and then asked the monk to follow him. They walked together through the forest until they reached a nearby river, where they saw a clear, calm pool of water. The Buddha instructed the monk to sit down by the water's edge. "Look into the water," the Buddha said. "What do you see?" The monk leaned over and saw his own reflection in the mirror-like surface of the water. "I see myself, Master," he replied. The Buddha continued, "Now, reach into the water and stir it with your hand." The monk did as he was told, swirling his hand through the water, which quickly became cloudy and disrupted. His reflection disappeared in the ripples. The Buddha asked, "What do you see now?" The monk looked and responded, "I see nothing. My reflection is gone because the water is disturbed." The Buddha then instructed him, "Now remove your hand and wait." The monk sat quietly, watching as the water gradually settled, becoming calm and clear once again. His reflections slowly reappeared on the surface, unchanged and serene. The Buddha explained, "The mind is like this pool of water. When it is calm and still, it reflects reality clearly. But when it is disturbed by emotions like anger, jealousy, or pride, it becomes cloudy, and you can no longer see things as they truly are. To see yourself clearly, you must let your mind settle and be still." The Buddha continued, "Do not fight against your emotions, trying to force them away. Instead, observe them with patience and compassion, and allow them to pass naturally, like ripples in the water. With time, the mind becomes calm, and your true nature shines through, undistorted." The young monk listened intently and realized that his struggles were like his attempts to stir the water to remove the ripples. Instead of reacting to his emotions, he needed to let them settle naturally, allowing his mind to return to a state of clarity and peace. The Buddha concluded, "True wisdom and peace come not from forcing emotions away, but from accepting and understanding them. Like a mirror that reflects clearly only when it is clean and undisturbed, so too does the mind reflect truth when it is free from turmoil." Moral of the story: the Buddha and the mirror teaches that clarity and wisdom come from a calm and still mind. By allowing emotions to arise and pass without attachment or resistance, we can achieve inner peace and see our true selves without distortion. This story encourages us to practice mindfulness and patience, observing our emotions without judgment and letting them settle naturally, like ripples in water, revealing the clear, undisturbed nature of our mind. This tale provides insight into the importance of self-reflection, acceptance, and the path to achieving a peaceful and balanced mind. The parable of the poisoned honey. Once, the Buddha gathered his disciples to teach them about the nature of temptation and the hidden dangers that lie within seemingly pleasant experiences. He shared a parable that would help them understand the importance of mindfulness and caution in all aspects of life. The Buddha began, "Imagine there is a hunter who seeks to capture wild animals. Knowing that animals are drawn to sweetness, he places a small amount of honey on a leaf near a forest trail. But he also mixes a deadly poison into the honey. The honey looks rich and inviting, but it holds a hidden danger." As he spoke, the disciples listened closely, intrigued by what the Buddha was going to say next. A deer, wandering through the forest, stumbles upon the leaf coated in honey. Curious, it sniffs the leaf and is drawn to the sweet aroma. The deer hesitates, but the honey's scent is so tempting that it decides to take a small lick. The taste is exquisite, and the deer feels a moment of pure delight. The Buddha paused, letting the image of the deer savoring the honey sink into the minds of his disciples. Then he continued, "However, the pleasure is short-lived. Within moments, the poison takes effect, and the deer collapses, its life ending because it could not resist the temptation of the sweet honey." The Buddha looked at his disciples and explained, "This honey is like the pleasures of the world. They appear sweet and satisfying, promising happiness and comfort. But hidden within them are the seeds of suffering and attachment. By clinging to these fleeting pleasures, we invite suffering, as our desires only grow stronger and bind us to this endless cycle of craving." One of the disciples raised his hand and asked, "Master, are all pleasures like poisoned honey? Should we avoid them completely?" The Buddha smiled kindly and replied, "Not all pleasures are harmful, but one must approach them with mindfulness and awareness. To indulge in worldly pleasures without caution can lead to attachment and suffering. Just as the hunter used honey to trap the deer, the mind can become ensnared by attachments that eventually harm us. He further explained, the wise person enjoys life's sweetness without clinging to it. When we experience pleasure without attachment, we can appreciate it fully and let it go without regret or longing. But if we become addicted to that pleasure, it becomes like the poison hidden in the honey, causing us pain when it fades. The disciples nodded, understanding the deeper meaning of the parable. They realized that the key was not to avoid all pleasures, but to remain vigilant and avoid being attached to them, recognizing the impermanence of all experiences. The Buddha concluded, practice moderation and mindfulness, enjoying life's moments without attachment. Remember that true happiness is not found in fleeting pleasures, but in inner peace, wisdom, and liberation from craving. Moral of the story: the parable of the poisoned honey teaches the importance of mindfulness in how we approach worldly pleasures. The sweet experiences in life can bring joy, but if we cling to them, they can also lead to suffering and entrapment. This story reminds us to enjoy life's pleasures without attachment, understanding their temporary nature, and to seek a deeper peace beyond fleeting satisfaction. This parable encourages us to practice awareness, balance, and detachment, ultimately leading us toward a more fulfilling and peaceful life. The fasting monk and compassion. In a quiet forest monastery, there lived a monk known for his strict ascetic practices. His dedication to fasting and meditation was admired by many, and he believed that by abstaining from all worldly pleasures and restricting himself to the bare minimum, he would attain enlightenment. The monk's practice of fasting was extreme. He would go for days without food, only taking water to sustain himself. Though his body grew thin and weak, he remained resolute, thinking that denying his physical needs would free him from all desires. One day, as he sat in meditation near the monastery entrance, a young boy passed by with a small bundle of food. The boy noticed the monk's frail appearance and stopped. He looked at the monk with concern and asked, "Sir, why are you so thin and tired? Have you not eaten?" The monk replied, "I am fasting to free myself from worldly desires. Food is a source of attachment, and by abstaining from it, I hope to reach enlightenment." The boy, innocent and compassionate, looked down at the bundle of food he was carrying. It was his family's meal, but he felt a deep empathy for the monk. Without a second thought, he offered the monk a portion of his food, saying, "Please, have some of this. It may not be much, but it will give you strength." The monk was taken aback. He hesitated, his mind torn between his practice of self-denial and the boy's genuine act of kindness. But looking into the boy's earnest eyes, he felt a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time, a reminder of human connection and compassion. Overcome by the boy's kindness, the monk accepted a small portion and ate. As he did so, he felt a renewed energy filling his body, but more importantly, a softening in his heart. In that moment, he realized that he had been so focused on his personal pursuit of enlightenment that he had forgotten the value of compassion and connection with others. The monk then pondered deeply, reflecting on his practices. He realized that while self-discipline was essential, so was compassion, for others and for oneself. True enlightenment, he understood, was not found through extreme self-denial alone, but through a balance of discipline and kindness. Compassion was not a distraction, but a necessary part of the spiritual journey. Later, the monk went to the Buddha to share his insight and seek guidance. The Buddha listened and then smiled kindly, saying, "Just as a bird needs 2 wings to fly, so does a seeker of truth need both wisdom and compassion. Discipline without compassion leads to rigidity, and compassion without discipline can lead to indulgence. Balance is the path to true enlightenment. The monk thanked the Buddha and, from that day forward, practiced his meditations with a balanced approach. He continued his path with a newfound humility, accepting the kindness of others and sharing his own compassion in return. His heart, now open to both discipline and compassion, grew wiser and more peaceful with each passing day. Moral of the story: the fasting monk and compassion teaches that true spiritual growth requires a balance between discipline and compassion. Self-denial and strict practices alone are not enough. We must also embrace kindness and understanding for others and ourselves. This story reminds us that compassion is not a weakness, but a strength that guides us toward a more holistic and fulfilling enlightenment. The story encourages a balanced approach in life, where self-discipline and empathy go hand in hand, helping us cultivate a deeper inner peace and genuine connection with others. The story of the generous king. Once, in ancient India, there was a kind and wise king who ruled over his kingdom with compassion and fairness. He was known for his generosity and deep commitment to the welfare of his people. The king believed that it was his duty to use his wealth and power to help others, and he gave freely to anyone who needed assistance, whether it was food, shelter, or money. One day, a wandering sage arrived at the palace. Hearing of the king's generosity, the sage wanted to test him to see if his kindness was truly selfless. Disguised as a poor beggar, the sage approached the palace and asked for an audience with the king. The king welcomed the beggar warmly, offering him food and shelter without hesitation. The beggar thanked the king and then asked, "Great king, you are known for your boundless generosity. But tell me, is there anything you would not give if someone asked for it?" The king replied with conviction, "I would give anything that is within my power to give. I hold nothing back if it is for the good of others." The beggar, still skeptical, decided to test the king further. He said, "Then, noble king, I ask for your most precious possession, your life. Will you give that to me?" Without a moment's hesitation, the king nodded and said, "If my life would serve a greater purpose, I would gladly give it. For what is a king, if not a servant of his people? My life is no more valuable than the lives of those I serve." The beggar was astonished by the king's selflessness, but pressed on, saying, "If that is your wish, then prove it by surrendering yourself to me." The king agreed, ordering his guards to bring forth a ceremonial blade, preparing himself with dignity and calm. The people of the kingdom, hearing of their king's intention, gathered at the palace, weeping and pleading for him to reconsider. They couldn't bear the thought of losing such a noble and kind-hearted ruler. But the king remained firm. He spoke to the crowd, saying, "My dear people, I have lived my life to serve you. If my life is asked of me, then it is my honor to give it. True generosity knows no limits." As the king prepared to sacrifice himself, the beggar dropped his disguise, revealing his true form as the sage. Smiling with admiration, the sage said, "Noble king, you have proven yourself to be the most generous and selfless ruler. I do not want your life. I only wanted to see if your heart was truly free from selfishness. You have shown me that your compassion is boundless and that you are willing to sacrifice even your life for the sake of others. May your name be remembered forever." Moral of the story. The story of the generous king teaches the virtue of selflessness and true generosity. The king's willingness to give everything, including his own life, shows that genuine compassion transcends personal gain. True generosity is not about giving only what is convenient, but about offering even that which is most precious when needed. This story inspires us to approach others with kindness and generosity, reminding us that true nobility comes from a heart willing to give selflessly. The king's example shows that true leadership and love for others are rooted in self-sacrifice and compassion. The monk and the tree. In a remote monastery nestled in the mountains, there was a young monk who had recently joined a community of monks dedicated to meditation and spiritual practice. This young monk was eager to attain enlightenment and devoted himself wholeheartedly to his studies and meditation. However, he struggled with impatience and often found himself distracted by his own thoughts and desires. One day, feeling particularly frustrated with his lack of progress, the young monk approached the abbot of the monastery and asked, "Master, how long will it take me to reach enlightenment? I have been meditating and studying diligently, but I feel no closer to understanding the truth." The abbot, a wise and compassionate man, listened to the young monk's concerns and decided to teach him a lesson about patience and inner growth. He said, "Come with me. I want to show you something that may help you understand the path to enlightenment." The abbot led the young monk through the forest surrounding the monastery until they arrived at a large, ancient tree. Its branches spread wide, providing shade and shelter to many creatures. The abbot motioned to the tree and asked, "Do you see this tree? How long do you think it took to grow to this size and strength?" The young monk looked at the tree, observing its thick trunk and wide canopy. "I suppose it must have taken many years, master," he replied. "But what does this have to do with my question?" The abbot smiled and explained, "This tree did not grow overnight, nor did it rush to become what it is today. It grew slowly, day by day, reaching deeper into the earth for nourishment and extending its branches to the sky. It withstood storms, droughts, and seasons of hardship, yet it continued to grow. Its strength and size are the result of steady, patient growth." The young monk listened intently as the abbot continued. "Enlightenment, like the growth of this tree, cannot be rushed. It requires patience, resilience, and dedication. Just as the tree's roots must grow deep to support its branches, your inner growth must also take time. You cannot force wisdom or understanding to come. They will arrive naturally as you cultivate patience and let go of your attachment to immediate results." The abbot then asked the young monk to sit beneath the tree and meditate, encouraging him to observe the calm presence of the tree, which stood peacefully and steadfastly, unaffected by the world around it. As the young monk sat in meditation, he began to feel a deep sense of peace. He understood that enlightenment was not a goal to be chased, but a natural outcome of steady, patient practice. Just as the tree grew at its own pace, he realized that he too would grow and evolve over time. From that day forward, the young monk approached his practice with a new sense of patience and acceptance, no longer rushing or judging his progress. He continued his path with the calm understanding that, like the tree, he would blossom in his own time. Moral of the story: the monk and the tree teaches the importance of patience and steady growth on the spiritual path. Just as a tree grows slowly, reaching deeper into the earth for strength, so must we cultivate patience and allow ourselves to grow naturally. Enlightenment and inner peace are not goals to be forced. They come as a result of dedication, resilience, and the acceptance of life's natural pace. This story reminds us that personal growth and wisdom are gradual processes. True understanding and enlightenment develop slowly, and by releasing the need for immediate results, we find a deeper peace and joy in the journey itself. The story of the rich man and his wishes. Once, in a prosperous village, there lived a wealthy man who was known for his vast riches and luxurious lifestyle. He owned grand houses, fertile lands, and countless treasures. Yet he felt an emptiness within him. Despite all his wealth, he was never satisfied and constantly longed for more. He believed that if he could fulfill just a few more wishes, he would finally find happiness. One day, the man heard that a wise monk was visiting the village. This monk was said to have a deep understanding of life's mysteries and could help people find true peace and happiness. Curious and hopeful, the rich man decided to seek the monk's guidance. When he arrived, he found the monk sitting quietly under a tree. Bowing respectfully, the man said, "Revered monk, I have everything a man could wish for: wealth, status, and luxury. But I am still not happy. I feel an emptiness that I cannot fill, no matter how much I possess. I wish to be truly happy. Can you help me?" The monk looked at the rich man and replied, "If you truly wish to find happiness, I can grant you 3 wishes. But remember, these wishes will not be like the worldly desires you have pursued. They are meant to bring you closer to real peace. Think carefully before you speak each wish." The rich man was overjoyed. He thought that with the help of these wishes, he would finally fill the emptiness in his heart. After pondering for a moment, he made his first wish. "First, I wish to be free from all my worries and troubles," he said confidently. The monk nodded and closed his eyes in silent meditation. "Your wish is granted," he said softly. "Go home and observe your mind carefully over the next few days." The rich man returned home, feeling hopeful, but to his surprise, he noticed that no matter what he did, his mind continued to produce thoughts of worry and concern. He realized that even though he had wished for freedom from his worries, they still lingered in his mind, resurfacing whenever he encountered challenges. Frustrated, he returned to the monk and said, "Monk, I wish to be free of my worries, but they have not left me." The monk replied, "Worries do not disappear simply because you wish them away. True freedom from worry comes from understanding and accepting life's uncertainties without clinging to outcomes." Reflecting on the monk's words, the rich man made his second wish. "Then, I wish to be free of my desires. It is my desires that make me restless and unsatisfied." Again, the monk closed his eyes and granted his wish. The man went home, determined to let go of his desires. However, he quickly found that his longing for wealth, success, and status did not disappear so easily. Though he had tried to suppress them, his desires resurfaced whenever he saw something new to acquire or achieve. Angry and disappointed, he returned to the monk. "Monk, I wish to be free of my desires, but they still trouble me." The monk smiled gently and said, "Desires, like worries, are a part of the human mind. They will not vanish by force. You must understand the nature of desire and see it as impermanent. Only then will you find peace with it." The rich man sat down and thought deeply. He had one wish left, and he was determined to make it wisely. After a long silence, he looked up at the monk and said, "For my third wish, I wish to understand myself. I wish to see why I am restless and never content, despite everything I have." The monk's eyes sparkled with approval. "Now you have made a wise wish. The path to true happiness begins with self-understanding." The monk then guided the man in meditation, teaching him to observe his thoughts, desires, and worries without attachment. He showed him how to look inward and understand his mind's nature. Over time, the rich man began to see that his restlessness stemmed from his own attachments and inability to accept life's impermanence. He realized that the emptiness he felt could not be filled with possessions, but with understanding and inner peace. Gradually, he learned to let go of his need to control everything and to find contentment within himself. The rich man no longer chased after possessions and status, for he had discovered a deeper satisfaction within his heart. He returned to the monk, bowing deeply in gratitude. "Thank you, wise monk," he said humbly. "I understand now that true happiness does not come from fulfilling every desire, but from knowing and accepting oneself." Moral of the story. The story of the rich man and his wishes teaches us that happiness and peace do not come from external possessions or fulfilling endless desires. True contentment comes from self-understanding and acceptance. Only by looking within and letting go of attachments can we find lasting peace and fulfillment. This story reminds us to seek happiness within rather than through material wealth, guiding us toward a deeper inner contentment and tranquility. Story of the Buddha and the beggar. One day, the Buddha was sitting and teaching his disciples in a quiet grove when a beggar approached him. The beggar was dressed in ragged clothes, his body was thin and weak, and his face reflected years of hardship. He had heard of the Buddha's compassion and wisdom and thought perhaps the Buddha could give him something valuable. The beggar bowed before the Buddha and said, "O Blessed One, I am poor and I have nothing in this world. Can you give me something to relieve my suffering?" The Buddha looked at the beggar with kindness and said, "Of course, but first, tell me what you already have." The beggar, slightly puzzled, replied, "I have nothing, Blessed One. I own no land, no money, no possessions." The Buddha smiled gently and asked, "Do you have your eyes?" The beggar responded, "Yes, of course." The Buddha continued, "Then, would you be willing to give me your eyes in exchange for a large sum of gold?" The beggar was shocked. "No, Blessed One, I could never give up my eyes, for they allow me to see the world." The Buddha nodded and then asked, "What about your hands? Would you trade them for a palace and servants to wait on you?" The beggar shook his head, realizing where the Buddha was leading him. "No, I would not. My hands are precious to me." The Buddha continued, "And your legs? Would you part with them for a kingdom?" Again, the beggar replied, "No, I would not." The Buddha looked at him with compassion and said, "You see, you may not have material possessions, but you are not poor. You possess priceless treasures, your eyes, your hands, your legs, and your mind. These gifts allow you to experience life, to work, to create, and to grow. True poverty is not the absence of material wealth, but the inability to appreciate and use what we already have." The beggar sat in silence, absorbing the Buddha's words. He had never considered his body and mind as treasures. He had always measured his wealth by material things and had seen himself as poor and lacking. The Buddha continued, "Happiness and contentment do not come from possessions, but from realizing the value of what you already possess. When you learn to appreciate and use your gifts wisely, you will find a wealth that no one can take from you." The beggar felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. For the first time, he understood that he was not as poor as he thought. He thanked the Buddha for opening his eyes to the true wealth within himself and left with a new perspective on life. Moral of the story: the Buddha and the beggar teaches us that true wealth is not measured by material possessions, but by the ability to appreciate the gifts we already have: our health, our senses, our mind, and our capacity to love and grow. This story reminds us that contentment and happiness come from within, not from external things. When we shift our focus from what we lack to what we have, we discover a richness that cannot be taken away. This story encourages gratitude and self-awareness, helping us recognize the value in ourselves and the blessings we often overlook. Story of the Blind Man and the Elephant. In ancient times, a powerful king invited a group of blind men from his kingdom to his palace. The king wanted to show them an elephant, an animal that the blind men had heard about but had never encountered. The king thought it would be interesting to see how each blind man described the elephant, so he instructed his attendants to lead each man to a different part of the animal. The first blind man reached out and touched the elephant's massive side. He said an elephant is like a sturdy wall. The second blind man, who had felt the elephant's tusk, disagreed. He insisted, "No, an elephant is sharp and smooth like a spear." The third blind man, touching the elephant's trunk, chimed in, "You are both mistaken. An elephant is like a long, flexible snake." The fourth man, who had wrapped his arms around the elephant's leg, shook his head and said, "It's clear to me that an elephant is like a tree trunk." The fifth blind man, feeling the elephant's wide flapping ear, exclaimed, "An elephant is definitely like a fan." Finally, the sixth blind man, who held the elephant's tail, disagreed with all of them, declaring, "This animal is nothing but a rope." Each blind man was convinced that his own experience was correct, and that the others were wrong. They began to argue loudly, each one sure that he knew the true nature of the elephant. The noise grew, and soon the king intervened to restore order. Smiling, the king said, "My friends, each of you touched a different part of the elephant, and each of you is partly right. The elephant has all of these characteristics that you described, yet it is more than any single part. Each of you experienced only one aspect, but the whole truth is beyond what any of you perceived individually." Hearing this, the blind men fell silent, realizing that they had each seen only a fragment of the elephant, and that their limited perspectives had led to misunderstanding. When the Buddha told this story, he used it to illustrate a profound truth about human understanding. He explained to his disciples, "In life, people see things from different viewpoints, shaped by their own experiences and perceptions. Each person holds a part of the truth, yet none can see the entire picture alone. Wisdom comes from realizing that others may see things we cannot, and that by listening to and learning from each other, we gain a fuller understanding of reality." Moral of the story: the parable of the blind men and the elephant teaches us about the nature of perception and the limitations of individual understanding. In Buddhism, it serves as a reminder of humility, open-mindedness, and the need to recognize our own partial views of reality. By respecting and learning from other perspectives, we can move closer to a more complete understanding of truth. This story encourages us to set aside rigid beliefs and to approach life with an open heart and mind. It highlights the importance of compassion and empathy, as we come to appreciate that every person's viewpoint contributes to the larger whole. Story of the Buddha and the Robe of Gratitude. One day, during the Buddha's travels, he arrived at a small village and decided to rest there with his disciples. The villagers, hearing of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion, came to pay their respects, bringing food and other offerings. Among the villagers was a poor man named Kalyana, who admired the Buddha deeply but had nothing to offer. Kalyana, who had lived in poverty his whole life, was a humble man with few possessions. All he owned was a simple, tattered robe he wore every day, but his heart was filled with love and gratitude for the Buddha. He desperately wanted to show his respect and devotion, even though he had nothing to give. That evening, as the Buddha sat with his disciples, Kalyana approached him with a shy smile. With great humility, he bowed before the Buddha, removed his only robe, and offered it to him as a gift. The Buddha took the worn, patched robe with reverence and grace. He could see the purity of Kalyana's heart and the sacrifice he was making. Though the robe was simple and old, the Buddha saw it as a precious gift of gratitude and sincerity. Smiling gently, the Buddha addressed his disciples. "Do you see this robe that has been offered to me by Kalyana? Though it is simple and worn, it is given with a heart full of gratitude and respect. True generosity is not about the material value of what we give, but the love and sincerity with which we give it." He continued, Kalyana has given freely from what little he has, not for praise or recognition, but out of genuine gratitude. This is the spirit of true giving. The Buddha then decided to wear Kalyana's robe for the remainder of his time in the village, honoring the man's pure-hearted gift. The other villagers were moved by Kalyana's act of kindness and by the Buddha's acceptance of it. Inspired by this display of gratitude and humility, many villagers began to adopt a more generous and compassionate way of life. Seeing the happiness and transformation this act of gratitude brought, the Buddha encouraged his disciples, "When we live with gratitude, we discover true wealth within ourselves. Just as Kalyana has given me this robe with a grateful heart, we should all cultivate a spirit of gratitude in our own lives. In doing so, we realize that we have much to give, regardless of how little we may possess." Moral of the story: the Buddha and the robe of gratitude teaches us that the true value of giving lies in the intention and sincerity behind it, rather than the material worth of the gift itself. Gratitude and generosity are qualities that can be practiced by everyone, regardless of wealth or status. The story of Lord Buddha and the golden fish. Once upon a time, in a peaceful river that flowed through a dense forest, a beautiful golden fish lived. It was known to the creatures of the forest for its radiant scales and graceful swimming. The golden fish was an embodiment of freedom and beauty, living without a care in the world. It had always been admired by the animals, birds, and even the humans who lived nearby. One day, a fisherman, a man who made his living by catching fish in the river, cast his net into the waters where the golden fish swam. After a long wait, he felt a strong pull on the net. Excited about his catch, he hurried to pull it up, and to his astonishment, he saw the golden fish trapped inside. However, the fisherman, although moved by the fish's plea, had a plan. He intended to sell the golden fish to the king, knowing that the king would reward him handsomely for such a rare catch. As the fisherman was preparing to take the fish to the palace, a group of monks came upon him. The monks had been traveling through the forest and noticed the struggle of the golden fish. Among them was Lord Buddha, who had been walking along the path and had seen the commotion. Buddha, seeing the fisherman about to take the golden fish, approached and asked what was going on. The fisherman explained that he had caught the fish and was planning to sell it to the king. Lord Buddha, who had great compassion for all living beings, looked at the golden fish with kindness and said, "This fish, like all living creatures, wishes to be free. Its life is its own. Let it go, and in doing so, you will receive a far greater reward." The fisherman, surprised by the Buddha's words, asked, "But if I let it go, what will I gain in return?" The Buddha replied, "By releasing this fish, you free yourself from greed and attachment. You will gain peace of mind, and blessings will come to you in ways you cannot yet understand. There is more to life than material gain." The fisherman, after some contemplation, decided to release the golden fish. As soon as the fish was set free, it leaped joyfully back into the river. The fish swam in circles, its golden scales shining even brighter under the sun. It seemed to express its gratitude through its movements. Lord Buddha smiled and said, "See, the fish is free, and in its freedom, it brings joy to the river. When we release our attachments and desires, we too experience true freedom, and our hearts become light." As the fisherman walked away, he felt a sense of peace in his heart. He had chosen compassion over greed, and the rewards of that decision were not just material, they were spiritual. Years passed, and the fisherman's life took a turn for the better. He was no longer consumed by the need to gain wealth, but was instead content with the simple joys of life. The blessings that came to him were abundant. But they were not the riches he had once sought. Instead, they were the peace and happiness that come from living in harmony with the world. The moral of the story of Lord Buddha and the golden fish, teaches several important lessons. Buddha showed compassion towards all beings, including animals, and advocated for the release of the fish, emphasizing the value of life. The fisherman's decision to release the golden fish teaches the importance of letting go of attachment to material gain and greed. The fish's return to the river symbolizes the freedom that comes from releasing desires and living in accordance with the natural flow of life. The fisherman's life became more fulfilling, not through wealth, but through spiritual peace and wisdom. This story encapsulates the essence of Buddhist teachings, where true happiness is not found in the pursuit of material wealth, but in compassion, wisdom, and detachment. The story of Angulimala and Buddha. Angulimala was born as a young man named Ahimsaka, which means the one who harms no one. He was a scholar, kind-hearted and gentle, living in a peaceful village. Ahimsaka was extremely intelligent and dedicated to his studies. He became a promising student of a renowned teacher. However, his teacher became jealous of his brilliance and sought to destroy him. In a cruel attempt to ruin Ahimsaka, the teacher falsely accused him of wrongdoings and expelled him from the school. Devastated by this, Ahimsaka wandered aimlessly, seeking solace and meaning. Eventually, he came upon a group of bandits who led him astray. They convinced him that the only way he could regain his honor and power was through violence. Ahimsaka, now consumed with anger, made a fateful decision. He adopted the name Angulimala, which means finger garland, because he began killing people and collecting a finger from each victim to make a garland. His actions became so brutal and widespread that he was feared and despised by the entire region. Angulimala killed 999 people in his relentless pursuit of completing his garland of 1,000 fingers. As Angulimala's killing spree continued, the local rulers and people became terrified. The king sent soldiers and hunters, but none could stop him. Word of Angulimala's bloodshed spread, and his reputation as a fearsome murderer reached even the most distant places. Meanwhile, Lord Buddha, who had already attained enlightenment, was traveling through the same region. He had heard of Angulimala's crimes, and knowing the deep suffering Angulimala had caused, set out to find him. Not to punish him, but to show him the way to redemption. As Lord Buddha walked through the forest, Angulimala, who was hiding among the trees, saw him approaching. Angulimala had killed so many that he had become a truly terrifying figure, yet the Buddha moved with calmness, serenity, and fearlessness. Angulimala, curious and astonished at the sight of someone so unafraid, decided to chase after him. He ran toward the Buddha, but no matter how fast Angulimala ran, he could not catch up with the Buddha, who was walking peacefully at his own pace. After a long while, Angulimala called out, "Stop, monk, stop!" He believed he was faster than Buddha, yet the Buddha continued walking slowly, unaffected by his cries. Finally, Lord Buddha turned and spoke to him calmly. "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who are still running." This profound statement had a deep effect on Angulimala. He had spent his entire life running from the pain, fear, and anger within himself. He had been running toward violence, hatred, and greed. Now, hearing Buddha's words, he realized that he had never truly stopped, and his inner turmoil had caused him to hurt so many people. In that moment, Angulimala saw the Buddha's deep compassion and wisdom. He fell to his knees and begged for forgiveness. He asked the Buddha, "Is it possible for someone like me, someone who has done so much harm, to ever find peace?" Lord Buddha, with great compassion, replied, Yes, Angulimala, you can still change. No matter how deep your past sins may be, if you truly wish to change, you can find peace. It is not too late for you. Angulimala, filled with sorrow for his past actions, took refuge in the Buddha's teachings and asked to become a disciple. The Buddha accepted him, and Angulimala, renouncing his violent ways, embraced a new life of compassion and mindfulness. Angulimala's transformation was profound. He became one of the Buddha's disciples and dedicated himself to the path of righteousness. He shaved his head, donned the robes of a monk, and followed the Buddha's teachings. Angulimala's remorse for his past actions was genuine, and he worked hard to purify his mind and actions. Though some people in the village could not forget his past and still feared him, Angulimala remained peaceful and resolute in his new life. He spent his time meditating, reflecting on the suffering he had caused, and helping others. His past reputation did not define him anymore. One day, when Angulimala was walking through the village as a monk, some villagers recognized him and, out of fear, started shouting at him and throwing stones. They called him a murderer and a criminal. Angulimala, however, remained calm and unfazed. He did not retaliate or become angry. Instead, he turned to the Buddha and asked, "Master, I am now a monk, yet the villagers still fear me and scorn me. What should I do?" The Buddha replied, "If a person throws a stone at you and you do not pick it up, who does the stone belong to? It belongs to the person who threw it. Similarly, if people throw insults at you and you do not accept them, they belong to the ones who insulted you." This teaching helped Angulimala understand that he no longer needed to hold on to the hatred or fear others had toward him. His transformation was internal, and he was at peace with himself. Angulimala lived out the remainder of his life as a monk, fully committed to the path of enlightenment. He was eventually able to attain arahantship, the highest level of spiritual attainment in Buddhism, where one is free from all defilements and attachments. In his final days, Angulimala was calm and serene. He reflected on his past, deeply grateful for the opportunity to be transformed through the Buddha's compassion. He died in peace, leaving behind a legacy of profound redemption. The moral of the story. The story of Angulimala is one of the most powerful teachings in Buddhism, illustrating the potential for transformation within everyone. No matter how dark a person's past may be, redemption is possible through wisdom, compassion, and mindfulness. No one is beyond redemption. The story shows that even the most heinous criminal can change if they sincerely wish to do so. Compassion, forgiveness, and the desire for inner peace can lead to transformation. The power of the Buddha's compassion. Buddha's unconditional love and understanding helped Angulimala realize the possibility of change and peace. Buddha's compassion reached even the darkest parts of Angulimala's heart. Self-reflection and renunciation. Angulimala's journey emphasizes the importance of self-reflection, renouncing harmful ways, and embracing a path of peace. The nature of forgiveness. True forgiveness, both for oneself and others, is a key part of the Buddhist path. Angulimala's story teaches that one can be forgiven and find peace when they are genuinely remorseful and seek to change. In the end, Angulimala's life became a powerful reminder that it is never too late to turn away from harm and begin the path toward liberation and peace. Story: The Buddha and the Broken Bowl. Once, as the Buddha was traveling with his disciples, they came across a small village. The villagers were excited to see the great teacher and offered him food, shelter, and other gifts. Among the offerings was a beautifully crafted bowl, which the Buddha accepted graciously. The bowl was a gift of respect and admiration from a devotee, and the Buddha appreciated it. but he did not show any attachment to it. The bowl was used by the Buddha during his travels, and it became an essential part of his daily life. However, as time passed, the bowl began to show signs of wear. One day, while the Buddha and his disciples were resting in the forest, a small accident occurred. The bowl was accidentally knocked over and broken into pieces. When the disciples saw that the Buddha's bowl was broken, they were filled with concern. They rushed to the Buddha and expressed their sorrow. "Master," they said, "your beautiful bowl has broken. How can you use it now?" The Buddha, with a calm and serene expression, replied to them, "Why are you upset? The bowl is broken, but it does not matter. Everything is impermanent. Just as this bowl is subject to decay, so are all things in the world." The disciples were surprised by the Buddha's reaction. They had expected him to be distressed by the loss of the bowl, as it had been a valuable and cherished possession. But the Buddha, without attachment, was unaffected by the loss. He continued, "The bowl is just a material object. Its purpose was to serve me during my travels. Now that it is broken, it has completed its purpose. I have no need to grieve over it. Just as the bowl is replaced by another, so too are all things in life. Everything comes and goes, and it is through understanding this impermanence that we can truly find peace." The moral of the story. In the end, the Buddha's reaction to the broken bowl exemplifies the wisdom that all material possessions, including our bodies, are impermanent. Life itself is ever-changing, and by learning to embrace this impermanence and release our attachments, we can find greater peace and contentment. The Buddha's calm and equanimous response serves as a powerful reminder to focus on what truly matters: our spiritual growth, mindfulness, and inner peace. The story of the Buddha and the broken bowl is a beautiful illustration of the core Buddhist teachings of impermanence, non-attachment, and the path to enlightenment. The story of the Buddha and the snake. One day, as the Buddha was traveling with his disciples, they came upon a village near the edge of a forest. A young man from the village had heard of the Buddha's teachings and was determined to test him. He did not believe in the Buddha's message of compassion and nonviolence and thought that he could expose the Buddha as a hypocrite. This young man had a venomous snake that he kept in a basket, and he decided to use it as part of his plan. He approached the Buddha and said, "Master, I hear you speak of kindness and nonviolence, but I want to know if you really practice what you preach. I will show you this snake, and if you truly believe in your teachings, you will not react with fear or anger." The Buddha calmly looked at the snake in the young man's hands and said, "I do not fear your snake, nor do I react with hatred or violence. I do not wish harm upon any being, no matter how dangerous or frightening it may seem." The young man, wanting to see if the Buddha's words were truly sincere, placed the snake on the ground in front of him and said, "Let us see if you can really practice what you preach, or if you will lash out in anger when faced with danger." At that moment, the snake, disturbed by the presence of so many people, began to hiss and coil itself, ready to strike. The young man stood by, eagerly waiting to see how the Buddha would react. However, instead of reacting with fear or anger, the Buddha simply extended his hand towards the snake in a calm and compassionate manner. He spoke gently to the snake. "I do not wish to harm you, for I see that you are also suffering in this world. I do not wish for you to strike, but to live peacefully." The snake, sensing the Buddha's calm presence and hearing his gentle words, seemed to relax. It stopped hissing, uncurling itself, and retreating back into the forest. The Buddha then turned to the young man and said, "You see, the true power lies in compassion, not in fear or aggression. Just as I did not respond to the snake with violence, so should we respond to all living beings with understanding, patience, and love." The young man was astonished. He had expected the Buddha to show fear or anger, but instead, the Buddha had remained peaceful and non-reactive, demonstrating the power of compassion over fear. Realizing the depth of the Buddha's wisdom, the young man asked to become a disciple and learn more about the Buddha's teachings. The moral of the story. The story of the Buddha and the snake demonstrates the Buddha's profound wisdom and his ability to respond to hostility with compassion and peace. It teaches us that the way to overcome anger, fear, and suffering is not through force or retaliation, but through understanding, patience, and love. By practicing these qualities, we can transform negative situations into opportunities for peace, just as the Buddha did with the snake. Story: The Buddha and the Hungry Tigress. In one of his previous lives, the Bodhisattva, the being destined to become the Buddha, was born as a prince in a royal family. He lived a life of luxury, but his heart was always filled with compassion for all living beings. The Bodhisattva was deeply concerned about the suffering of others, especially animals and those in need. One day, while traveling through a forest with his retinue, the Bodhisattva and his companions came across a starving tigress who was unable to find food. She had been searching for food for days, but had not been able to catch anything. The tigress was weak, and her bones were showing through her fur. She had several cubs who were also hungry and crying out for food. Seeing this sight, the Bodhisattva was filled with great compassion. He understood that the tigress was a mother, and her hunger was not just her own, but also the hunger of her young ones. The Bodhisattva could not bear to see them suffer. The prince immediately realized that the only way he could help was to offer himself as food for the tigress and her cubs. His selflessness was a demonstration of the highest form of compassion. He said to his followers, "I will offer myself to the tigress so that she and her cubs may live." The Bodhisattva then laid himself down in front of the tigress, offering himself as food. He spoke gently to the tigress, "Take my life, for I would rather give myself to you than see you and your cubs die of hunger. May this sacrifice save you from suffering." As the tigress began to approach, something miraculous happened. The tigress, feeling the pure compassion radiating from the Bodhisattva, hesitated. Her hunger was intense, but she was moved by the Bodhisattva's selfless act. She did not immediately attack him. At that moment, the Bodhisattva's compassion was so great that the miracle occurred. The tiger could not bring herself to take his life. Instead, she seemed to feel the deep love and understanding from the prince, and she relaxed, retreating from the prince's body. The tigress and her cubs did not need to harm him. The Bodhisattva's act of offering himself, his pure compassion, and the deep love for all living beings caused a transformation in the situation. As a result, not only did the tigress refrain from attacking, but she and her cubs were also freed from their hunger. The Bodhisattva's compassionate act brought great peace to the tigress and her cubs, and the animals were able to live without suffering. The prince, although willing to give his life, was miraculously saved because of the powerful energy of love and compassion he embodied. The moral of the story. The story of the Buddha and the hungry tigress is a beautiful example of the Bodhisattva's compassion and his willingness to go to any lengths to help others. Through his act of self-sacrifice, the Bodhisattva shows us how to embody the highest ideals of compassion, love, and selflessness. The tale is a reminder that, through acts of love and kindness, we can transcend suffering and help bring peace to the world, even in the most dire of circumstances. The Farmer and His Troubles. Once upon a time, in a quiet village surrounded by lush fields and peaceful hills, there lived a hard-working farmer. Though he toiled day and night to provide for his family, the farmer always seemed unhappy. His crops sometimes failed, his livestock occasionally wandered away, and his neighbors often annoyed him. He carried a constant burden of worries and frustrations. One day, the farmer heard that the Buddha was visiting a nearby village. Known for his wisdom and compassion, the Buddha attracted people from all walks of life, seeking guidance and solace. The farmer decided to visit the Buddha to find a solution to his troubles. When he arrived, the farmer found the Buddha sitting under a large tree, surrounded by disciples and villagers. The atmosphere was serene, and the Buddha's presence radiated peace. The farmer approached the Buddha and bowed respectfully. "Revered one," the farmer said, "I am beset with troubles. My crops sometimes fail, and I have to worry about feeding my family. My animals often wander off, and I must spend hours searching for them. My neighbors are difficult, and my children don't always listen to me. I work hard, but there is always something to worry about. What can I do to rid myself of all these troubles?" The Buddha listened attentively, his serene expression unchanging. Then, with a gentle smile, he responded, "I cannot help you with your troubles." The farmer was taken aback. "But, revered one, you are known for your wisdom. If you cannot help me, then who can?" The Buddha continued, "Everyone has troubles. In fact, every person in this world carries at least 83 problems at any given time. Sometimes crops fail, animals get lost, neighbors are difficult, and loved ones may not behave as we wish. These are the 83 problems of life." The farmer was confused. "What do you mean? Are you saying I must live with these problems forever?" The Buddha nodded gently. "Yes, as long as you live, you will have 83 problems. Some may go away, but others will replace them. This is the nature of life." The farmer grew frustrated. "Then what is the point of seeking wisdom if you cannot help me with my problems?" The Buddha smiled again and said, "While I cannot help you get rid of your 83 problems, I can help you with your 84th problem." The farmer frowned. "What is my 84th problem?" The Buddha looked at him with deep compassion and replied, "Your 84th problem is that you think you should have no problems." The farmer fell silent, reflecting on the Buddha's words. He realized that he had spent so much time resisting and lamenting his troubles that he had missed the peace that comes from accepting life as it is. In that moment, he understood that his problems were not the source of his suffering. It was his constant struggle against them. With a newfound sense of clarity, the farmer bowed deeply to the Buddha. "Thank you, revered one," he said. "I will try to embrace my life, problems and all." The farmer returned to his village with a lighter heart. Though his work and challenges remained the same, his perspective had shifted. He found peace not in solving all his problems, but in accepting them as a natural part of life. His neighbors noticed the change in him and began to admire his calm demeanor. Soon, his children and friends began to ask him for advice, and the farmer shared the wisdom he had learned from the Buddha. Moral of the story: the story of the farmer and his troubles teaches us that life is inherently full of challenges, but suffering arises when we resist or try to eliminate them all. True peace comes from accepting the natural difficulties of life and letting go of the belief that we should live without problems. Wisdom lies in letting go. The greatest wisdom is learning to live in harmony with life's imperfections, finding peace within. This timeless Buddhist parable reminds us to shift our perspective and embrace life's ups and downs with grace and understanding. The Buddha and the Flower Sermon. One day, the Buddha gathered his disciples for a teaching. On this particular occasion, instead of delivering a lecture or explaining the Dharma through words, the Buddha did something unexpected. The Buddha sat in front of the assembly of monks and held up a single lotus flower. The flower was fresh, vibrant, and beautiful, but Buddha said nothing. He simply gazed at the flower, and the monks sat in silence, waiting for the Buddha to speak and explain its significance. The Buddha's disciples, each trying to understand what the Buddha was trying to convey, looked around, puzzled and silent, waiting for the Buddha's words. However, there was one disciple who did not react with confusion. Mahakāssyapa, one of the Buddha's closest disciples, looked at the flower and smiled. His smile was not one of mere amusement, but a smile of deep realization, a smile of understanding that came from within. It was a sign that he had directly grasped the essence of what the Buddha was conveying, without needing words. The Buddha, noticing Mahakāssyapa's smile, said, "I have the eye of the true law, the seal of the Dharma, and I transmit it to Mahakāssyapa." The Buddha, noticing Mahakāssyapa's smile, said, "I have the eye of the true law, the seal of the Dharma, and I transmit it to Mahakāssyapa." This marked a profound moment in Buddhist history. The Buddha did not simply give a verbal sermon. Instead, he transmitted wisdom in a form that transcended words, a silent transmission through the flower. Mahakāssyapa's smile indicated that he had understood the profound truth of the flower, not through intellectual understanding, but through a direct, intuitive realization. The moral of story: the transmission of Dharma beyond words. The Flower Sermon emphasizes that true wisdom and the essence of the Dharma cannot be fully captured by language or conceptual thought. The Buddha's silent gesture of holding up the flower was a direct transmission of his insight. Words and concepts are limited in their ability to convey the true nature of reality. Thus, the story encourages direct experience of wisdom beyond intellectual comprehension. Nonverbal communication. The Buddha's holding of the flower and Mahakāssyapa's smile symbolize a deeper form of communication, one that doesn't rely on words but on direct perception and intuition. In Zen Buddhism, this is known as mind-to-mind transmission, or direct pointing to the mind. It is a way of teaching that transcends logic and intellect, aiming at a direct experience of enlightenment. Zen and the direct experience of truth. The story is especially significant in Zen Buddhism, where emphasis is placed on direct insight and awakening, rather than reliance on scriptures or elaborate discourses. In Zen, the Flower Sermon represents the idea that true realization can occur in an instant through a sudden, direct experience of reality. The smile of Mahakāssyapa has come to represent the Zen idea of sudden enlightenment, the moment when a person directly perceives the true nature of things without intellectual analysis or explanation. The role of the teacher and the student. The Buddha's recognition of Mahakāssyapa's understanding is also symbolic of the relationship between teacher and student in Buddhism. A true teacher imparts wisdom not only through teaching, but through creating an environment for direct experience. The student, in turn, must be open to receiving and directly perceiving that wisdom, as Mahakāssyapa did. Mahakāsyapa's enlightenment. Mahakāssyapa's smile marks his enlightenment, or his realization of the nature of the Dharma. His reaction to the flower shows that true wisdom arises from within. Enlightenment in this context is not something to be intellectually grasped, but something that is already within every person, waiting to be realized. His smile was a natural expression of his inner awakening to the truth. In this story, the Buddha points directly to the heart of the matter, where the ultimate truth cannot be captured by ordinary language. The flower sermon remains a key teaching in Zen Buddhism and continues to inspire practitioners to seek the truth within themselves, beyond intellectual knowledge and concepts, and to experience the world directly, just as Mahashpa did in that moment of silent enlightenment. The Buddha and the glass of water. One day, a man approached the Buddha and asked, "Lord, I have many troubles in my life. I feel constantly overwhelmed by the stresses of work, relationships, and all the problems that seem to come my way. I do not know how to handle these burdens. Can you help me find peace?" The Buddha, known for his wisdom and understanding, smiled gently and said, "I will show you a way to understand your troubles." He then took a glass of water from a nearby table, held it in front of the man, and asked, "How heavy do you think this glass of water is?" The man looked at the glass and said, "It is not very heavy, Lord. I would say it is just a few ounces." The Buddha nodded and continued, "Yes, that may be true, but what would happen if I held this glass of water for a few minutes?" The man thought for a moment and replied, "It would not be much trouble, Lord. I would not feel any discomfort if you held it for a short time." The Buddha smiled again and asked, "And what if I held this glass for an hour?" The man replied, "It would start to become uncomfortable, Lord. My arm would begin to ache." "Very well," said the Buddha. "What if I held it for an entire day?" The man now looked concerned. "That would be unbearable. My arm would be in great pain, and I would not be able to hold the glass any longer." The Buddha then set the glass down on the table and said, "Exactly. The glass itself does not change in weight, yet the longer I hold on to it, the more it causes me pain and discomfort. This is how it is with our worries, our anger, our anxieties, and our attachments. They are like this glass of water. If we hold on to them for a short time, they may not trouble us much. But if we carry them around for too long, they begin to weigh us down and cause us great suffering." The moral of story. The Buddha's teaching with the glass of water serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of releasing our burdens, whether they are worries, regrets, or negative emotions. By practicing mindfulness and non-attachment, we can let go of these heavy feelings before they overwhelm us. Life is full of challenges, but the Buddha's wisdom shows us that we can choose not to carry the weight of those challenges unnecessarily. The story encourages us to recognize that much of our suffering comes from holding on to things for too long. Like the glass of water, the weight of our troubles is often not as significant as it seems at first, but it becomes unbearable when we carry them for too long without letting go. Through mindfulness, we can learn to release them and live more freely, peacefully, and in the present moment. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the wisdom of Buddha. If you found these stories inspiring and helpful in calming your mind, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Buddhist Insights channel for more motivational content and spiritual guidance. Stay connected for more teachings that will bring peace, clarity, and wisdom into your life.